Okay, here we are. Welcome to the evening Bhagavad Gita class. And we got 12 people so far. Hopefully a few more will join us. And we are ready to go. We're live on Facebook and live on YouTube. And we're going to chant Caitanya Madhava. Alrighty. Okay, and I'll chant for my deities. A second. Okay. Jaya Radha Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Bichana Padapa Jaya Giri Varodari Giri Varodore Bichana Palapa Jaya Giri Varodari Jaya Giri Varodare Yasoda Nandana Jaya Prachadana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Jaya Prachadana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Manachari Raho Kunja Vihari Jaya Kunja Vihari Yamuna Tira Manachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Kunja Vihari Jaya Randu Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Randu Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Gopi Channapanava Jaya Giri Varudari Giri Varudari Gopi Channapanava Jaya Giri Varudari Giri Varudari Yasoda Nandana Jaya Vrajajana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Jaya Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Raho Kunja Vihari Jaya Kunja Vihari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Kunja Vihari Jaya Randu Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Randu Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvacharya Satata Satashi Shimad His Divine Grace, Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivinoda Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrind Ki Jai, Namacharya Shadoridas Thakur Ki Jai, Param Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopikapatnath Shyam Kunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Maturadam Ki Jai Jagannath Swami Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Shrimati Lalasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bo. All glories to the assembled devotees, 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 all glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nama Om Vishnupadaya, Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namani, Namaste Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pacharni, Nirvashesha Shunyavadi, Paschatcha Deja Tarani. So, Om Ganat Midandasha Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshuru Meditam Yena Tasmai Shigurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances under the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with a torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So we'll continue with our study of the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta. We're on the 9th chapter of the Adi Lila, and we're going to finish this chapter today by Krishna's mercy and begin the 10th chapter. So, Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda, Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda, Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Okay, let us go. Sharing the screen with all of you. That's how merciful I am. I'm sharing my screen. Here we go. And let me just get this set up so it'll work for all of us, participants. And move that to below. That's good. Okay. Text 52. There's probably only 2 or 3 texts left in the whole chapter. So, Sarvaloke matakoila kapana samana prema mataloka vina nahi degirana. Which is all about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's ecstasy. With the Sankirtan movement, the Lord made everyone mad like himself. We do not find anyone who is not intoxicated by his Sankirtan movement. Ye purve ninda koila bali matolyala seho pala kaya nache bale bala bala. Persons who had formerly criticized Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, calling him a drunkard, also ate the fruit and began to dance, saying, "Very good, very good." So when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started the Sankirtan movement, even though he was unnecessarily criticized by Mayavadis, atheists, and fools, naturally, even he was unnecessary. Naturally, we are also criticized by such men. They will always remain and will always criticize anything that is actually good for human society. But the preachers of the Sankirtan movement should not be deterred by such criticism. Our method should be to convert such fools gradually by asking them to come and take prasadam and chant and dance with us. This should be our policy. Anyone who comes to join us, of course, must be sincere and serious regarding spiritual advancement in life. Then such a person, simply by joining us, chanting with us, dancing with us, and taking prasadam with us, will gradually also come to say that this movement is very good. But one who joins with an ulterior purpose to get material benefit or personal gratification will never be able to grasp the philosophy of this movement. Next text. Eta kahilum prema pala vitarana eva shuna pala data ye shakagana. After describing the Lord's distribution of the fruit of love of Godhead, I now wish to describe the different branches of the tree of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this, of course, is the end of the chapter. Shri Rupa Raghunatha Padayara Rasha Caitanya Caritamrta Koi Krishna Dasa. Praying at the lotus feet of Shri Rupa and Shri Raghunatha, always desiring their mercy, I, Krishna Das, narrate Shri Caitanya Caritamrta, following in their footsteps. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to Shri Caitanya Caritamrta, Adi Lila, 9th chapter, describing the desired tree of devotional service. And then we'll go on to chapter 10. Wow. The trunk, branches, and sub-branches of the Caitanya tree. So this is a chapter summary, very short. This chapter describes the branches of the tree named Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Padamboja Madhupebhyo Namo Namaha Katanchidashraya Desham Shapitad Gandhabhag Bhavet. Let me repeatedly offer my respectful obeisances unto the bee-like devotees who always taste the honey of the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If even a doggish non-devotee somehow takes shelter of such devotees, he enjoys the aroma of the lotus flower. Purport. The example of a dog is very significant in this connection. A dog naturally does not become a devotee at any time. But still, it is sometimes found that a dog of a devotee gradually becomes a devotee also. Anyway, it's really funny. He said a dog naturally does not become a devotee at any time, but still it is sometimes found that a dog of a devotee gradually becomes a devotee also. So that's by a devotee's mercy. It's not a contradiction. So we've actually seen that a dog has no respect even for a tulasi plant. Indeed, a dog is especially inclined to pass urine on the tulsi plant. Therefore, the dog is the number one non-devotee. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement is so strong that even a dog-like non-devotee can gradually become a devotee by the association of a devotee of Lord Chaitanya. Srila Shivananda Sena, a great householder devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, attracted a dog on the street while going to Jagannath Puri. The dog began to follow him and ultimately went to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and was liberated. Similarly, cats and dogs in the household of Srivas Thakur were also liberated. Cats and dogs and other animals are not expected to become devotees, but in the association of a pure devotee, they are also liberated or delivered. And actually, there's a story, apart from the story of Shivananda Sen and his dog, there's a story about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his puppy. When Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very young, just a little boy, he was playing and he and his friends discovered a whole litter of puppies. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pretty much adopted that puppy, brought him home, and said to his mother, "Look what I have, Mom, a nice little puppy, a puppy dog." And the mother was thinking, Moochie, Moochie, Moochie. Because Moochie means unclean. And so she said to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, "Then you go and play, I'll take care of the puppy." And actually she put the puppy out and probably gave him away or something like that. But later on that puppy went back to home, back to Godhead by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. Similarly, in the story of Shivananda Sen and that dog, that's an interesting story, I guess I should tell it. This dog was accompanying the devotees to Jagannath Puri when they were going to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu during the 4 months, which they usually went to Jagannath Puri for. So this dog was accompanying, and the devotees were feeding the dog, because the devotees take care of any living entity, whether it's a dog or a cat or whatever animal approaches them, and takes shelter of them. So this dog had taken shelter of them. So Shivananda Sain was taking care of all the devotees and also taking care of the dog. He was actually a wealthy man, a businessman, so he actually had the means to do so. And one day, while he was arranging for the devotees and paid a toll, and actually paid a toll at a particular point so the dog could actually cross a river. But one day, he was engaged and he was paying the toll, and the dog left. And Shivananda Sain came back and he asked his servant, he said, "Where's the dog? I want to feed the dog some prasad." And the servant said, "The dog just went away. I guess it was hungry." And Shivananda Sain got so upset that he had neglected his responsibility towards the dog. What did he do? Shivananda Sain began to fast himself. But that dog had gone ahead and joined Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So finally, when the devotees got to Jagannath Puri, they saw Caitanya Mahaprabhu was there in his room, and the dog was there too. And Caitanya Mahaprabhu was throwing some coconut pulp, I guess some green coconut pulp or something, to the dog. The dog was catching it, and the dog was chanting, "Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare." And it's described that that dog, a few days later, went back to home, back to Godhead. So by the mercy of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, not only can a dog swim an ocean, a blind man see, or a layman climb a mountain, but a dog can actually go back to home, back to Godhead. And similarly, we see, by the mercy of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, which was given by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, so many dog-like, cat-like, monkey-like people. Actually, Prabhupada sometimes would say his monkey disciples. Like Prabhupada went into the jungle and got everybody to chant. So anyway, so many dog, monkey, cat, gorilla. Actually, many people were like gorillas. They actually became Krishna conscious, became great saintly persons. So by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pure devotees like Srila Prabhupada, anything can happen. So Jaya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda, Jaya Advaita Chandra, Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. All glories to the Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda, all glories to Advaita Prabhu, and all glories to the devotees of Lord Chaitanya, headed by Shri Vasa. Hey Malira, hey Vrikshara, Akatya Katana, Eva Shunamukya Shakara Nama Vivarana. The description of Lord Chaitanya as the gardener and the tree is inconceivable. Now hear with attention about the branches of this tree. Of course, the branches of the tree indicates Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's devotees. Branches, sub-branches, etc., like that, which we'll hear about in this particular chapter. Chaitanya Goswami Yata Parisharachaya Guru Lagu Bhava Tanra Nahaya Nischaya. The associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were many, but none of them should be considered lower or higher. This cannot be ascertained. Yata yata mahanta kaila tansabara gandhanha ke karivare nare jeshta lagu krama. All the great personalities in the line of Lord Chaitanya enumerated these devotees, but they could not distinguish between the greater and the lesser. Otayvatan sabare kari namaskara Namamatra karidosha nalabe amara. I offer my obeisances unto them as a token of my respect. I request them not to consider my offenses. Bandi Shri Krishna Chaitanya Premamarataro Prihan Shakarupan Bhaktakanan Krishna Prema Pola Pradhan. I offer my obeisances to all the dear devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the eternal tree of love of Godhead. I offer my respects to all the branches of the tree, the devotees of the Lord, who distribute the fruit of love of Krishna. Sri Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami sets the example of offering obeisances to all the preacher devotees of Lord Chaitanya without distinction as to higher and lower. Unfortunately, at present, there are many foolish so-called devotees of Lord Chaitanya who make such distinctions. For example, the title Prabhupada is offered to a spiritual master, especially to a distinguished spiritual master such as Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, Srila Jiva Goswami Prabhupada, or Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada. When our disciples similarly wanted to address their spiritual masters Prabhupada, some foolish people became envious, not considering the propaganda work of the Hare Krishna movement. Simply because these disciples addressed their spiritual masters Prabhupada, they became so envious that they formed a faction along with other such envious persons just to minimize the value of the Krishna consciousness movement. To chastise such fools, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami very frankly says, Keha, Karibari Nari Jeshta Lagu Krama. Anyone who is a bona fide preacher of the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu must be respectful to the real devotees of Lord Chaitanya. One should not be envious, considering one preacher to be very great and another to be very lowly. This is a material distinction and has no place on the platform of spiritual activities. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami therefore offers equal respect to all the preachers of the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who are compared to the branches of the tree. ISKCON is one of these branches, and it should therefore be respected by all sincere devotees of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So the history of Prabhupada being called Prabhupada is very, very interesting. So here's the story. Like in the beginning of the movement, Prabhupada was not called Prabhupada. He was referred to as Swamiji. Of course, the word G at the end of Swami, of course, means someone in the renounced order of life or someone respectful. It means master, really. G refers to someone who's respectable. G, sometimes I'll speak to someone from India and say, yes, G. And I'm thinking, I'm not a G. But they're thinking, yes, respectable persons. Swamiji, Prabhuji, Mataji. Huh, it's interesting. Mataji means respectable mother. Otherwise, just Mata means Ma, Mami. Mataji means, respectable mother. Or Mata Shri is even better. So anyway, Swamiji, he was called Swamiji. But that's really like a generic designation for anybody who is a sannyasi. Not necessarily one spiritual master. It doesn't indicate he's a great devotee. It just means he's respectable because he's a Swami. So it's considered almost like a second, third class designation nomenclature. Not that it's bad. I mean, someone says Swamiji, that doesn't mean they think I'm third class, but it's just like a generic. There's so many Swamiji. Vivekananda Swamiji, this Swamiji, that Swamiji, Swami, way down upon the Swamiji River. I know Swami River. Anyway, so then Prabhupada commented one time to Govindadasi, my god sister, and said, Swamiji is a sort of a third class designation. She said, that what should the spiritual master be called? Or, what is it? Hold on, I got to change this one thing here. There's a picture that fell down. Okay. Picture of Ganesh that fell down. I don't want to line down. So she said, what should the spiritual master be called? And Prabhupada came out with different words. I mean, not only Prabhupada, Vishnupad, and there's also some pod names that you have. I'll tell you something funny after this. But anyway, and then Prabhupada came in with a whole bunch of different names, and she said, Prabhupada, can we call you Prabhupada? And Prabhupada basically said, yes, that is okay. And when Prabhupada said that, she said, all right. And then she sent out a letter or inform the devotees in the movement. Of course, there was no email or Twitter or whatever at that time. She said now he wants to be called Prabhupada. Now it was actually her idea to send that out, and and Prabhupada didn't tell all the devotees now I should be called Prabhupada, but she. It was actually in line with what Krishna wanted too. But she informed all the devotees, and from that day forward, Swamiji became Prabhupada. Then, when not all the godbrothers, but when some of the godbrothers heard that, they got really upset. Why? Because their spiritual master, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, was called Prabhupada. So here is the disciple taking the same, let's say, last name or nomenclature or a title. It's a title, really. That their guru had, one of their godbrothers. I mean, I would think like in ISKCON, if one of us were to take the name Prabhupada, I mean, it'd be a different thing. But anyway, I'll explain why it would be different. It would be pretty upsetting. But the interesting thing is, when Prabhupada took that name, he wasn't within his spiritual master's institution. Try to understand that. Had Prabhupada been within his spiritual master's institution, had his godbrothers cooperated with him, had they worked together, Prabhupada would not have taken the name Prabhupada, because that was specifically reserved for the acharya of the institution. And of course, the word acharya generally indicates one who sets an example, but the founder acharya, with the big A, of the institution, he sets an example that the rest of the institution follows. So he's the founder, he started the institution, and whatever example he sets, yad charati shreshtas tat evetaro janaha, as the Bhagavad Gita says, as a great man acts, everyone else follows. So that's a specific position. But in ISKCON, Prabhupada is the founder acharya, and in the Gaudiya Math, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada is the founder acharya. So it was completely appropriate for Prabhupada to do it in his own institution. And the reason Prabhupada founded his own institution because his godbrothers did not want him to work as was directed by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur inside one of the Gaudiya Maths. In fact, the Gaudiya Maths had pretty much broken apart by that particular time. They were fighting as to who was the acharya. They were fighting as to who possessed the assets of the institution, and court fights may even be still going on today because they were fighting for the material aspects or assets of the institution. So Prabhupada started ISKCON, and in ISKCON, he is ISKCON's Prabhupada. Got it? Not in his spiritual master's institution. So from Prabhupada's disciples, grand disciples, great-great-grand disciples, and for whoever is in ISKCON, Prabhupada is Prabhupada. Now that's really important. So anyway, that's the history, and many of us really got upset, and they confronted Prabhupada when Prabhupada went to India one time, and Prabhupada, this is an interesting story, Prabhupada talked to them, and one of the devotees left the tape recorder going secretly, and he heard later on the whole conversation. They were just like very accusatory with Srila Prabhupada. Not all of them, some of them. And Prabhupada actually said it was his disciples who decided to utilize that particular name. So that's the history. Now, there's some more recent history that's even interesting, maybe a little humorous. So when Srila Prabhupada left this world, his disciples, who took on the role of spiritual masters in the movement, they decided that they also had to have pod names. Of course, no one could take the name Prabhupada. And I think one of the reasons it was decided like that was because at that time, when Prabhupada left the planet, the world was pretty much divided into 11 areas where each guru would have his own initiating zone. So, regardless of who you wanted as a guru, if you were in a particular area, you had to accept that person. That was called the zonal acharya days. And it was quite traumatic because, in one sense, in certain cases, not in every case, particular individuals became the be-all and end-all of the Hare Krishna movement instead of Prabhupada in that particular location, and it was traumatic for many of Prabhupada's disciples to see their God, not just out of envy. I'm not saying out of envy. In certain cases, there might have been some envy, but just because, it's Prabhupada's institution. ISKCON is Prabhupada's institution. And all of us are meant to bring people to Srila Prabhupada. It is not our institution, it's Prabhupada's institution. For example, when I go away, pass away, whatever I may say as far as Guru Yamaraj, run away, pass away, whatever, then I expect my disciples to remain faithful to the GBC and serve within ISKCON and serve Prabhupada and connect with Prabhupada. And also, my relationship with them is eternal too. That's a fact. But really, I want them to be centered on Prabhupada's mission, not my mission. My mission is non-different from Prabhupada's mission. In other words, if they want to follow my mission, they have to satisfy Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada's mission is more devotees, happier devotees, just to increase the number of devotees and the quality of devotees. That's really the point. I mean, that's really will satisfy Prabhupada. And of course, maintain the temples and all that other stuff. So, anyway, so when Prabhupada left the planet, there were the, 11 personalities, and I'm not criticizing anyone, I'm just telling you what happened. The people needed to have a name. And they had to have a pod name or a Dev name. It became quite, let's say, almost a joke with some of us, like what sort of name. I mean, even myself, when I took on the service of initiating disciples in 1985, which was actually just a few years after Prabhupada left. Oh my God. And there's a whole history of that, how we wanted to expand the number of gurus in ISKCON. Practically, we had a revolution at that time. We didn't storm the Capitol, but almost. So, I mean, the history, it's quite an interesting history, because we wanted the movement to be more centered on Prabhupada and not the 11 spiritual masters, who many were very nice and doing very nicely. I mean, some really went off the rails for a variety of reasons. So we wanted the movement to be centered on Prabhupada, so I was part of the revolutionary group that did storm the Capitol. Not the United States Capitol, ISKCON. We didn't storm it. What we did was we had these meetings, I think it was every week or two, in this place called Tuaco, New Jersey, where there's a temple. And it was in the middle of the winter, just like it is now. Sometimes because we were all young men, we would actually go sledding together during the breaks of the meeting. It was quite a fun time. And we were planning on how to change the movement. So eventually there was arranged a 50-man committee. And this 50-man committee demanded that things would open up, and basically the whole GBC would be reformatted, and certain members would resign and certain new members would be appointed. So that happened around 1984, 85, if I remember correctly, and culminated with a meeting in New Vrindavan in 1985. I remember I was at that meeting, and that's where I took on the service of being a guru, in New Vrindavan. So then things really opened up. There were more initiating spiritual masters in ISKCON, and even then, those of us who are newbies, we decided we needed a pod name too. To tell you the truth, I don't even remember my pod name. Some people were called Vishnu Pod, Kuranga Pod, Sankirtan Pod. You know, we used to joke about this, like Pod, Mridanga Pod. No, nobody was called Mridanga Pod. Shripad, yeah, thank you for it. Oh, my name was Shripad. Tulsi just remembered that. It was Shripad. Wow. Anyway, it was it was an interesting time in ISKCON because everybody, you know, as they say, sometimes you say keeping up with the Joneses. So this was keeping up with the pods. So many times people are just really caught up with nomenclature, you know, what they're called, whatever. And as you get older, it's not so important except for if it helps preaching. And Prabhupada, getting back to Prabhupada, Prabhupada accepted it because it helped the preaching. There was absolutely no false ego when Prabhupada accepted that particular title, whereas with many of us, including myself, we just wanted to keep up with the pods because you couldn't be one of them. You know, as the saying goes, if you can't beat them, join them. So if you can't be one of them without having a similar name. So that's a real funny ISKCON history of pods. So anyways, now you understand. Of course, Prabhupada, actually I should get back to the title, Prabhupada. The word Prabhupada, the word Prabhu means master, and pod means feet. So it's two ways to understand the word Prabhupada. One is that it's a master that you should sit at the feet of, but even a higher understanding of that particular word or nomenclature or Prabhupada's title is that he who other masters sit at the feet of. In other words, other qualified great devotees sit at the feet of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So that's a very appropriate title for the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So anyway, so that's the history of Prabhupada. And it's quite an interesting, or the history of pods. It's quite an interesting history, and some of it is a little humorous. But here Prabhupada in his purport talks about how there's envy and how some of his spiritual masters became very upset and envious that his disciples had called him by that name. But actually, there's been many Prabhupads in our Sampradaya, Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada. And there's other names also that are very exalted, like Thakur. Thakur is like a Paramahamsa title. Like you have Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Of course, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was not a sannyasi, but he was sometimes considered the seventh Goswami of Vrindavan, even though he wasn't a Goswami, technically, externally speaking, but because he was such an exalted devotee and completely renounced from this world. And in fact, he had so many children. Of course, his best son was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. Okay, let's continue. We got a few more minutes. I thought it was important to tell that particular history. Srivasa Pandita Ara Shri Rama Pandita Dvivai Dvi Shaka Jagate Vidita. The two brothers, Srivas Pandit and Shri Ram Pandit, started two branches that are well known in the world. In the Gora Ganadesha Deepika 90, Srivasa Pandit, Srivas Thakur, is described as an incarnation of Narada Muni. Wow. And his brother, let me just see something, whoops. And his brother, And Sri Rama Pandit, his younger brother, is said to be an incarnation of Parvata Muni, a great friend of Narada's. Srivasa Pandit's wife, Malini, is celebrated as an incarnation of the nurse Ambika, who fed Lord Krishna with her breast milk, and as already noted, his niece, Narayani, the mother of Thakur Vrindavan Das, the author of Sri Caitanya Bhagavat, was the sister of Ambika and Krishna Lila. We also understand from the description of Sri Caitanya Bhagavat that after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's acceptance of the sannyas order, Srivas Pandit left Navadvip possibly because of feelings of separation and domiciled at Kumara Hata. Of course, Srivas Thakur, who was previously Narada Muni, was married, which is quite interesting because Narada Muni is generally taken as a brahmachari, someone who never gets married. But to join Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, he got married. And in fact, his house was the place where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started the Sankirtan movement. It's called Srivasangam, which is very close to the place where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. And Advaita Bhavan, that Advaitacharya's house is very close to his. Of course, Advaitacharya had his main house at Shantipur, but during the Navadvip pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he stayed in Navadvip. So in Srivas Thakur's house, there was nightly Sankirtan, and only pure devotees were allowed in that particular house. And so many wonderful pastimes occurred in that house, which we'll hear about later on. So Srivas Thakur was instrumental in arranging the location where the Sankirtan movement started. So Sripati, Srinidhi, Tanradvi, Sahodara, Chari Vaihradasa Dasi, Graha Parikara. Their two brothers were named Sripati and Srinidhi. These four brothers and their servants and maidservants are considered one big branch. Dvishakaro Vashakaya Hansabara Gandhana Yanra Grehe Mahaprabhura Sada Sankirtana. There's no counting the sub-branches of these two branches. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu held congregational chanting daily at the house of Srivasa Pandit, which I just mentioned. Charibai Sambamshe Hari Chaitanyara Seva Gurachandra Vinanahi Jani Devi Deva. These four brothers and their family members fully engaged in the service of Lord Chaitanya. They knew no other god or goddess. Srila Narottam Thakur has said, Anya Devashaya Nai Tomare Vakainubai E Bhakti Parama Karana. If one wants to become a pure, staunch devotee, one should not take shelter of any of the demigods or goddesses. Foolish Mayavadis say that worshipping demigods is as good as worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but that is not a fact. This philosophy misleads people to atheism. One who has no idea what God actually is thinks that any form he imagines or any rascal he accepts can be God. This acceptance of cheap gods or incarnations of God is actually atheism. It is to be concluded, therefore, that those who worship demigods or self-proclaimed incarnations of God are all atheists. They've lost their knowledge as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 7:20. Kamaistastarita jnana prapajante nrityevataha. Those whose minds are distorted by material desires surrender unto the demigods. Unfortunately, those who do not cultivate Krishna consciousness and do not properly understand the Vedic knowledge accept any rascal to be an incarnation of God, and they are of the opinion that one can become an incarnation simply by worshiping a demigod. This philosophical hodgepodge exists under the name of the Hindu religion, but the Krishna conscious movement does not approve of it. Indeed, we strongly condemn it. Such worship of demigods and so-called incarnations of God should never be confused with the pure Krishna consciousness movement. So for those of you who don't know what demigods are, they're simply powerful persons who work under the jurisdiction of Krishna. in this universe to carry out different affairs within the universe. Affairs means, in this particular respect, different management stuff. And that's it. It's just like you have a president of the United States and his cabinet. Simply the same. Or a king and his assistants, prime minister, whatever. So you cannot confuse the members of the cabinet with the president of the United States. I mean, that's a real big problem if you do that. They are different. So in the same way, you cannot confuse these demigods. In fact, that's considered to be, let's say, you're considered to be an atheist. There's this verse that I would often quote. Yastu Narayanan Devam Brahmarudradivata Samitvainayava Viksheta Sapashandi Bhavetrabam. That if one considers the demigods to be equal to Lord Vishnu, then that person is a Pashandi, he's an atheist. That's actually one of my favorite verses. However, I used to get myself in trouble by reciting that particular verse. How did I get myself in trouble? Because I would go, sometimes being invited to a Hindu temple. Now, what's a Hindu temple? Well, the word Hindu is a geographical designation. It was given by people who were basically Parsis. Anyone will describe what that is. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with Parsis. They're very nice. As a geographical designation. At first it started with Sindhu. Sindhu, of course, means like an ocean, because that refers to India, which is on the other side of the ocean or whatever. And then Sindhu became, when people couldn't pronounce the S properly, Hindu, became Hindu. That's where the word Hindu came in. There's no mention of the word Hindu in any of the Vedic literatures, which is interesting. Very, very interesting. In fact, people who were members of the Vedic tradition never called themselves Hindus until it became so ingrained when the Muslims were calling them Hindus that they began to utilize that term as a self-designation. But originally, it was only the Muslims. They said, well, the Muslims call us Hindus, but, we don't know what Hinduism is. They may be Shaivites or Vaishnavites or Advaitas, whatever. It means Mayavadis or whatever, but they weren't Hindus. It was never used internally. It was used externally by the Muslims, basically. And then eventually it began to be accepted internally, and that's where the word Hindu came from. So, but basically, if you classify everything that's not Muslim or Christian in India under the nomenclature of Hindu, you got a potpourri. Potpourri means like a combination that's unbelievable of different beliefs. Some people think there's no God. Some people think that we're all God. Some people think there's a void, like Buddhism. Some people think, even sometimes they consider Buddhists to be part of Hinduism. There's a designation, some legal definitions are like that. And some people consider Vishnu to be God. Some people consider Shiva to be God. Some people consider Ganesh to be God. Some consider all the demigods to be God. So in order to pacify everyone, if you have a Hindu temple, you got to believe in all those things. Not believe in all those things, but present all those things. So you have to have an altar for everybody. So that's why Prabhupada says here, this philosophical hodgepodge exists under the name of the Hindu religion. So, that's really what is going on, what was going on. And what we are not Hindus, although sometimes we say we're Hindus and we're a branch of Hindus when we're talking to someone who's a professor who doesn't understand a damn thing. But we say that we are Vaishnavites. We are the followers of the Vedic literatures, the direct followers of the Vedic literatures. We don't make indirect interpretations or speculative interpretations of the Vedic literatures and accept the Vedic literatures as they are. Whereas everybody else is making indirect interpretations or taking things out of context in the Vedic literatures to justify their type of worship, which is generally either materialistic or nihilistic or atheistic. Okay, with that in mind, so we are ending here. The next text is text 12. So we ended to text 12 in the 10th chapter. Okay, note that down. So let us end our sharing. So instead of sharing with you, we refuse to share with you right now. And we will let you talk. It's nice to be able to control your audience. I've always wanted to do that. And Krishna's arranging this for me in the form of Zoom. So who has a question? Joking aside, who has a question or a comment they'd like to make? Rishikesh. Yeah, I can hear you. Are you better now? Overcome the COVID?
No, I'm still negative. I don't have any symptoms.
Oh, you're negative. That's good. That's interesting. Like, I never thought that I'd be happy when someone was negative. Because I always liked positive people before, but now I like negative people.
That's a good one, Gurudev.
So, so I bless you to always be negative. So,
Thank you, Gurudev. Your blessing is the most bottom line in my
but
life.
you also have to get the vaccine too.
Yes, Gurudev, I'm just waiting for it. I don't know if I can bump it up, but it looks like I'm in group 5 right now. So,
Oh, group 5, you're going to wait a long time.
yeah. So,
Anyway,
Gurudev, my
just,
question was I
yeah.
hear many devotees in our movement also are named as Sripad or Acharya Deva. Is that still authentic or how they are? Um,
Well, there was a GBC rule a while ago that should be using these nomenclature, but it's something that you can't really enforce. I mean, I don't go by the name Shripad anymore. But, sometimes when you've been calling someone a pod name or a Dave name for so many years, it's hard to change it. Like, in the older gurus, they pretty much stuck with their names because, they've been called it for so long. You can't really ask them to change it. But the ones who became initiating after that, like myself and Bhakti Chu Maharaj, never took a pod or a Dave name. But once you've been calling your guru a name for 5 years, you're not going to stop.
yeah, that's true.
Once your guru is called Srila Pod, Srila Prasadam Pod, Prasadam Pod, all glorious to Prasadam Pod. I mean, you've established a standard. So I guess you just stick with it. You stick with it, and nobody's going to get on their case for it. But it's really in ISKCON we want people to generally have their name, and Sheila, whatever their name is, and generally we want the special nomenclature just reserved for communication between disciples and guru. So when people refer to me, let's say if it said disciple, talking about me to someone who is one of my godbrothers, they'll just say, well, my spiritual master, uh, whatever, Prasadam Pod. What did it say? Uh, Kasha Pod or Quinoa Pod. Quinoa? Quinoa Pod or Prasadam Pod. Or Computer Pod. My spiritual master, Computer Pod, he would like to do this or that. So they generally, it's better to say my spiritual master, so and use their name, not pod. I'm sorry, you should use their name. Like, or my Guru Maharaj. Generally, for example, when I'm talking to the disciples of Bhakti Guru Maharaj, they say Guru Maharaj, or my Guru Maharaj said this, or Guru Maharaj said that, and then it's understandable. And usually when you use these Pod or Dave names, it does establish like one or two tiers, levels of spiritual masters, which is not really what we want to do in ISKCON. We want everyone to equally respect their spiritual masters and equally respect all the other spiritual masters. So we've really gotten away from the pod and the day of names. Although some people, they're addicted to it, so let them continue whatever they want to call their spiritual master. As long as they know his PayPal account, it's all right. So no, I'm just what? So what's that?
One more question, Gurudev. I just heard a class from Gaudiya Mutt. He was talking about the difference between Shiksha Guru and Diksha Guru.
Right.
And he said that Diksha Guru represents Krishna directly, and Shiksha Guru represents Radharani, who leads to Krishna. So I was wondering, within the framework of ISKCON, is that the Shiksha Guru and Diksha Guru plays the same role?
According to Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Diksha Guru and Shiksha Guru are equal but different manifestations of the Supreme Lord. As far as his statement about Shiksha Guru represents Radharani or Diksha Guru represents Krishna, I do not find a Shastric reference for that. Okay. I would say in many cases, Diksha Guru represents Radharani and Krishna, and Diksha Guru represents Radharani and Krishna. I mean, they're both presenting the same thing. I mean, for example, the Diksha Guru, how can you say the Diksha Guru doesn't represent Radharani? Because the Diksha Guru gives the Gayatri mantra, which, especially the Kama Gayatri represents Srimati Radharani. So I wouldn't really make that distinction, and I do not see any Shastric reference for making that difference between Diksha Guru and Shiksha Guru. I mean, sometimes you say that the Diksha Guru represents Madan Mohan Vigraha and the Shiksha Guru represents Govindaji, like that. Sometimes there's that statement, but actually we find that the Diksha Guru also gives Shiksha, so he's also Shiksha Guru. And then we find the Shiksha Guru also gives basic Sambandha Gyan too. So we don't find that clear distinction in the instructions of between the instructions of Diksha Guru and Shiksha Guru. At least I don't find that clear distinction between.
So I was wondering, within ISKCON we have Shiksha Guru. We follow all Srila Prabhupada's teachings. So
yeah,
that's the main central point. Whether it's Diksha Guru or Shiksha Guru doesn't matter.
Well, Diksha Guru, someone is qualified as a guru in ISKCON, either Shiksha Guru or Diksha Guru, if they follow Prabhupada's teachings and serve his mission. Not only his teachings, his mission, because part of Prabhupada's teachings are to serve the mission and push forward Srila Prabhupada's mission. So they're actually part of Prabhupada's mission. One really, in essence, couldn't be considered a full Siksha or Diksha Guru representative of Prabhupada unless they were serving his mission. A Diksha disciple, Siksha or Diksha disciple of Prabhupada, sorry. Unless they were serving his mission. So, I mean, they may take Siksha from Prabhupada. There are many people outside ISKCON who've taken Siksha from ISKCON. That is true, absolutely true. But to be fully surrendered and absorbed in the Siksha of Prabhupada, one would have to be serving his mission. Just like you're a disciple of Bhakti True Maharaj, so to be a disciple of Bhakti True Maharaj means to follow his instructions. And I'm dealing quite a bit with the disciples of Bhakti True Maharaj because I'm a member of the conference, what's called previously the Legacy Conference, and we changed the name to the Seva Conference. So I know that every one of them, your godbrothers and godsisters, received the instructions by Bhakti True Maharaj to remain faithful to ISKCON, remain within ISKCON, and follow the GBC. So to be an actual Siksha or Diksha disciple of Bhakti True Maharaj would mean to stay within ISKCON. And I haven't heard any of them say anything different than that. They're actually, all of your God brothers and God sisters that I've come in contact with have been extremely loyal to Prabhupada and ISKCON. I mean, they all have different opinions. And, like any family, there's sometimes differences of opinions between each other. I mean, that's life. But they're all completely dedicated to following Prabhupada and following the directions of the GBC, which is actually very nice. And similarly, I would like my disciples, when I go to see Yamaraj, to do the same. Or else I will bring Yamaraj with me, and they will see the Yamadutas. That's a threat. So anyway, any other questions,
Thank
Rishikesh?
you, Gurudev. Thank you,
Thank you.
Gurudev.
So who else wants to ask a question? Wow, everybody's quiet today. What happened with Pran Govinda? Is he still alive?
Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances of to Prabhupada. I was paying attention, listening your conversation about guru issues. Very nice. Very simple and clear. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
We'll have to call you Pran Govinda Pod.
You can call me whatever you want, Maharaj. I'm your servant.
Govinda Pod. Actually, that's a really nice guru name, Govinda Pod. Like Om Vishnu Pad, Paramahansa, Paravajakacharya, also Tara Satashri, Srimad, His Divine Grace, Govinda Pad. So anyway.
Maharaj.
Yeah.
On Bhagavad Gita 9.15, it appears like, because I'm teaching Bhakti Shastri to IBM, ISKCON Bhagavad Mahavidyalaya.
That's
it
nice.
shows that Krishna is very liberal. It says, and in the purport, Prabhupada gives the gradation of different worshipper, and does not say atheist or demigods are bad or anything. Krishna is like giving a gradation with a liberal mind, in a sense. In the purport, Prabhupada write, the top class is Mahatmas, then next lower is the 4 types of approaches Krishna. Then lower than that are 3 types: one who thinks he is God, and one who take any form, and the other takes the different form of universal form. So there I don't see any, like, it seems like a very nice way presented, liberal way, like we are not judgmental or sentimental.
Yeah, Prabhupada was being very liberal for most of us. And Prabhupada was acted differently and preached differently in different circumstances. He never changed the philosophy, but his presentation was adaptable to different circumstances. No, you don't change it.
What do you want me to represent that in the Bhakti Shastri course? I'm just...
Well, I would say, therefore, you should tell Prabhupada that, not tell Prabhupada, but tell your students, that means you should preach according to time, place, and circumstance. That if you want to be successful in Western preaching, you have to preach and adjust certain details or the method of presentation to your audience. That's all. That's what, I mean, Prabhupada is just showing that. That's not always appropriate just to smash people. That's why after visiting a variety of Hindu temples, I never got invited back, because I would quote that one verse that I cited in class, Yastu Narayanam Devam Brahmarudradi Daivata. You know that verse?
Yeah.
So one who considers the demigods to be equal to Narayan, he's a Pashandi. So I was saying, I was in the middle of a Hindu temple and calling everybody a Pashandi. And for those of you who are from India, you know what that means, isn't it?
Yes.
If I go up to someone and say, you're a Pashandi,
it's scary.
And
they will not
like
that's
an insult.
Yes.
It's not light. It's like calling someone worse than rascal. And it's just, And I was doing that when I was like 28 or 30 years old. I mean, now I can get away with a hell of a lot more than I did then. Because when you're older, you can get away with a lot. That's what I like about being old. I could say things and they think, oh, he's an old guy, we have to be respectful. But when you're 30 years old, I mean, so people think, who's this kid? Nobody's called me kid or son in a long time.
So you adapting Prabhupada's mood, because Prabhupada said also, as an old man, I can say a few things. Like Kirtiraj Prabhu said when Prabhupada went to Indian embassy in New York, he was like arguing with them. But then Prabhupada came out, he said, you cannot do that. I can do it. I'm an old man. It's okay.
Yeah, so there's advantages to being old. You can really get away with almost anything. And people think, oh, he's old, we have to be respectful even though he's cranky.
Maharaj, can I ask you one technical question?
Yes, your divine grace.
Oh, Krishna. Maharaj, as long as I have your foot dust, I'll be okay. That's all I meditate. Maharaj, last week or sometime back on the Adi Lila chapter, you gave a very nice, I really got attracted. I didn't express that to you, but I got attracted the way you said that why Mahaprabhu took sannyas. And because he felt responsibility, because he cares for those ignorance, marthas, and all those 6 types of.
Right.
You gave a very nice explanation that how Mahaprabhu felt that responsibility, and in order to deliver them, he took sannyas. So they will pay obeisances whether they like or not. This is like a common thing, you pay sannyasi obeisances. Right. My question is that, is it really Mahaprabhu created this scenery, or this is actually happened? Is not Jogomaya influencing them to create the opposition so he can take sannyas, so he can relish the mood of Radharani's separation? Or is it really he wants to go to Vrindavan, that Mother Sachi told him to stay? Just to see, or if both are correct, we just have to
both
take
are correct.
It as it is.
Both are correct. One is the esoteric reason for him taking sannyas. One is the exoteric reason. Both are correct.
I see.
It's not that one is wrong, one is right, but one is the primary reason. The primary reason is the internal reason. Obviously, he could have had people respect him even without taking sannyas. But it gave him an excuse to take sannyas because as a sannyasi, the mood is sharanagati. Like you have the 9 processes of devotional service. And the last process is that the process executed primarily by sannyasis. I mean, everybody can execute the last process, but at least externally, because a sannyasi is supposed to depend wholly and solely on Krishna without any external support. So it's just like Atma Nivedanam. The word Atma can refer to the soul, can refer to the body, it can refer to the mind, as you know from Lord Chaitanya's exposition on the Atmarama verse, right?
Yes.
So Atma Nivedanam is a specific process for sannyasis to execute, and Sharanagati, Atma Nivedanam. And so that's what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to enter into, that mood of extreme surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so that taking sannyas facilitated that particular mood. That's internal. The mood of vipralamba. And also sannyasi is supposed to serve in the mood of vipralamba. Yugayitam nimishena chakshusha parushayitam shunyayitam jagat sarvam govinda vidahename. So, the last 2 verses of the Shikshashtaka are in relationship with the sannyasa order of life. As you're aware, each verse of the Shikshashtaka can indicate a different level of advancement in devotional service. It can also indicate a different time of the day in Krishna's Astakaliya Lila. but can also indicate a particular process of devotional service.
Hmm.
So the process, or at least sannyas is very much connected with Atma Nivedana.
I appreciate your inner depth on that. That was
Inner
very
depths.
nice. Yes, Maharaj, it was very attractive. Maharaj, sometimes
Inner
I worry,
depths.
like if I become too familiar, I'll lose the opportunity of your spiritual identity.
My spiritual
Wha-
identity, I'm just a cow in the spiritual world. So this guy, you're in Alachua, you see some cows, and you'll remember me. That's all.
You are hilarious, Maharaj.
All you got to do is every time you see a cow, you should just remember me. Actually, sometimes it's described. Did you know that Krishna is a cow? And Arjuna is milking the cow.
Yes,
That's from Shankaracharya's description.
the glory of Bhagavad Gita. Yes.
Yeah, the glories of Bhagavad Gita, Gita Mahatmya. So
Hmm.
anyway,
So
okay.
Maharaj, then the question is, in
Oh,
Navadvip, Lord Chaitanya
yeah.
Mahaprabhu did not manifest his spiritual potency at Navadvip, but he did
He did.
manifest
He
in South
did. He
India.
manifested. He started a Sankirtan movement, and he manifested Vipralamba Seva right after he took sannyas in
Yes,
Navadvip.
after he.
After he took, I'm sorry, after he took initiation.
But still it
Also
was
after he
locked.
took,
It was still locked.
it was
But,
locked, but fully after he took sannyas.
but then Prabhupada said he gave something in the South India easily, which he did not do in Navadvip.
Yes.
So is it similar, like if we are too close to great personality, that we may miss sometime?
Yeah, we take
Because
them
we,
for granted. We take them for granted. That's a common thing. Like Prabhupada's wife and family members did never really understood or appreciated Prabhupada.
that's true.
So if one is too close to a great personality, one actually loses sight, unless one is extremely mature. That's why it says a neophyte devotee should not be close to the spiritual master or close to the deities, because they take it for granted.
Hmm.
Okay, I got to end
Okay,
now. Oh, got to go back to my
thank you.
spiritual identity. My spiritual identity. I have to go. I have to go to samadhi pretty soon.